Inglourious Basterds is Quentin Tarantino's 2009 film about World War II, where he takes a shit on history and creates his own version of events. But one big question remains. Did Hans Landa know who Shoshanna was when they met at the restaurant? In Inglourious Basterds, Tarantino wanted to create the most terrifying and charismatic villain ever, so to not glorify, you-know-who, he reduced that guy to a babbling idiot and instead created his own Satan from scratch. Enter Hans Landa. He's more than just a narcissistic sociopath. He's almost an omnipotent devil. He is incredibly intelligent and 10 steps ahead of everyone else. So much so that in the end, he has the power to single-handedly end the war himself and tries to use it to his advantage. We could go on and on about what he represents and the philosophy behind his character. But if you ask me, Tarantino simply wanted a fascinating character who could take the spotlight away from A-Dog and all the other horrible war criminals that actually existed in real life, and instead deliver an entertaining but fictional main villain to a clearly fictional story. The character he wrote was so hard to cast that Quentin actually debated canceling the film altogether, thinking no one could ever play that part convincingly, until they ran into Christoph Waltz, who we can all agree, absolutely killed it. So, did Hans recognize Shoshanna? In the first scene of the film, which is a masterclass in building tension through dialogue, we meet Hans Landa as he visits a dairy farmer in France. Hans knows exactly what Monsieur Lapadite is hiding and where, but he plays the game anyway. Why? Because he loves seeing himself win. See, to Landa, this is all so easy, that simply winning isn't enough for him. He could easily arrest Monsieur Lapadite on the spot and then execute the family he was hiding underneath the floorboard without wasting so much time. But where would be the fun in that? You know how when you play Monopoly and you become the richest player at the table with the most hotels and you're clearly on your way to bankrupt everyone and win, and yet you still enjoy playing a few more rounds just to feel like the top dog, even though it's pointless at this point because there's no way anyone else will catch up to you. This is what Landa is doing. He wants to play the game he already knows he has won. He interrogates Ray Donovan because he thinks of himself as a detective and wants to break him right then and there, even though he has already done all the detective work necessary to know exactly where the family is hiding and could clearly skip all of this and be on his way. He acts as the most polite person in the world as he invites himself into his home, but slowly but surely reveals himself as the wolf in sheep's clothing as he's talking to the farmer. And check out this look he's giving him when he finally asks, point blank, if he's hiding the family underneath the floorboards. Remember this look, we'll be seeing it later. So he gets the satisfaction of breaking the guy and getting him to confess, and it's all business from there. But why does he let Shoshanna go? I've called Hans Landa the omnipotent devil for one reason alone. He's the only one in control in this film. Nobody else seems to be. The bastards are brave, but they're somewhat incompetent. Hell, they managed to mess up what should have been a very simple operation in a bar, and then at the night of the premiere, managed to mess up even further, getting that poor actress killed, even though she seemed to be the most competent member of the whole operation. Even Dolph Lundgren here has more honor and appears to be a better soldier than them. Forget the badass montage of them kicking ass in the war. Tarantino makes sure to let us know that they're just rabid dogs who would have ended up dead if it wasn't for Hans's master plan. So what is Hans's master plan? Well, he knew the war would end, and not in Germany's favor. So, being 10 steps ahead of everyone else, he let Shoshanna go because he instinctively knew that she was special and may be useful to him someday. Yes, you heard me. It was all part of his plan. Tarantino wanted us to feel so threatened by Landa that he gave him the superpower of foresight to let Shoshanna go that day and let her end up in a position to kill the higher command and secure his safety. I'm not saying he was psychic, but I'm saying that he just had the instinct to see her potential and see her as useful to him someday. So for whatever reason, he let her go. And in the end, she was instrumental in helping him achieve his goal of switching to the other side. So I think this answers the big question. So did Landa know who Shoshanna was? Yes. Let's look at the evidence. Hans Landa comes into the restaurant out of nowhere. He's an important man. He doesn't just waltz in restaurants randomly. No pun intended, Christoph. He was there for a reason. He stops Shoshanna right away and intimidates her from the get-go. Then he orders milk for her, which is obviously not a coincidence and is a reference to the dairy farm she grew up on. He then basically forces her to have a strudel with cream. And the way they made cream back then was not kosher to a Jewish person, which is exactly why Hans insists on her having it, and why Quentin insists on focusing on it. There are no random insert shots in a Tarantino film, so the fact that they spent so much dialogue and screen time on that cream speaks volumes about its importance. Then at the end says he has one more question to ask her, and does the face again. The "I know exactly what you've done" face we see at the beginning of the film. But then says he forgot and lets her go, just like he aimed at her and almost shot her, but then said au revoir and let her live. And by the way, au revoir in French literally means till we see each other again, which even more proves Hans Landa instinctively knew he would run into her again. But why do all of this? Because he enjoys playing the game. He wants her to be afraid. He wants her to think that maybe he knows. He has no problem being overly polite and acting naive. But he wants the people he interrogates or hunts to know that they are at his mercy. But in this case, he needs her to be alive and do her thing. So he lets her go after creeping her out. But if he's truly omnipotent, then how come he loses? So if Hans Landa is an omnipotent devil and an all-knowing supervillain ahead of everyone else, how come he ends up losing? Look, Hans didn't win, but he didn't exactly lose either. He is a sociopathic war criminal and serial killer who gets away scot-free and receives asylum in the United States after being one of their worst enemies. His plan still worked out. Not only did he not get killed in that theater, but he'll be a free and wealthy man in Nantucket Island. He'll still be in a good place at the end of the day. However, there's just one thing he didn't account for: the bastard's human side. And that is his only true weakness. He is so caught up in seeing this whole thing as a game that he forgets about the human side of things, which he doesn't have, but Aldo does. Aldo doesn't give a flying about money, ranks, honor, or deals. He still sees Landa as a mass-murdering psychopath who shouldn't just get away completely unharmed from this. As we have discussed before when analyzing Pulp Fiction, Tarantino loves giving his characters tests and then punishing or rewarding them in his own way. And this movie is no different. He let Hans get his way because he wanted to have an all-knowing, all-powerful villain that isn't totally defeated in the end. But in a story about World War II, you can't have the bad guy win 100%, and so the humanity of the Allies has ultimately prevailed. They won the war, killed all the higher-ups, and gave Hans Landa a humiliating and honorless end to his seemingly impenetrable plan. Aldo gets the last laugh because he represents America in this war. Flawed, imperfect, and not completely without sin, but at least on the right side of morality. Hans Landa might just be one of the best villains ever written or portrayed in a film. His instinct is basically a superpower, and the only thing that brings him down is his inability to think like a human, which is ironic, considering that in the opening scene, he brags about being good at his job because he can put himself in the enemy's shoes. But he seems incapable of putting himself in a human being's shoes, probably why he talks in terms of rats, squirrels, and hawks, but ignores basic human nature. To him, it's all a game. Everyone is a player, and there's honor amongst, murdering psychopaths. Aldo, on the other hand, is a simple man who couldn't hold a candle to Hans from an intellectual point of view, but Aldo is a human being. And not only does he not respect Landa as his enemy, but he would rather risk his freedom and military career than let him win and walk away from all the crimes he has committed. So while he understands that he has to let him live for the deal to go through and the war to end for good, he can't let our man Hans go unpunished. Once again, Tarantino gives a masterclass in writing and directing. There are so many things that could go wrong with a film like this, and this project would absolutely implode in less competent hands. But our man QT delivered one of his best films. I consider it his second best, after Pulp Fiction. And certainly a film where his genius as a screenwriter is undeniable. Christoph Waltz steals every scene he's in, and it's almost as if he was born to play this role. For now, I bid farewell to you and say, adieu. See you next time when we talk about another incredible villain named Hans. Until then, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you want to see more content like this. Also hit the like button, share, don't be lazy. Also, don't forget to check us out on all the other platforms where we post daily film content in short form.